Welcome to the Faith Ignite podcast YouTube channel. We're so happy that you tuned in. My name is Rosa Williamson, and I'm one of the creators of the Faith Ignite podcast. Now, before you listen, make sure you click that like button, hit subscribe, and if this is impacting your life in any way, make sure that you share with all your friends and family. And also, lastly, turn on those notifications. We'll be launching an episode every 2 weeks, so make sure you have your notifications on so you're ready to listen and ready to have your faith be ignited. We just thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for your support. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the Faith Ignite podcast, guys. We're so glad you guys are listening today. I'm here with my wonderful husband.
Yep, Devon Williamson, and we are so glad that you guys have tuned in today. And so before we get into this episode, we just remind you of a few things. If this content is helping you in any way, make sure you like, share, subscribe it, so that way we can continue to share this content with whoever needs it around the world. So don't forget, like, share, subscribe, because it makes a big difference. And so we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. We have two amazing guests with us. We've been trying to track them down to get them on this podcast for some time now, but we finally had the opportunity to do so. And so with that being said, we want to introduce our guests, Jordan and Brianne Smith.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And this is going to be a fun one. So we like to start off by, especially when it comes to couples, how did you guys meet?
Okay. Well, we met when I was about 15 years old. He was 16, and my best friend and him went to church camp that summer, and I didn't go, but she came back and said, hey, there's this really nice guy that I met, and he goes to your school. Do you know him? And I was like, well, that name sounds kind of familiar. But he at the time would have come out of 9th grade. I was in 8th grade, so we were just too far apart, and I hadn't gotten up to the high school yet. So first day, my freshman year, I went up to him and introduced myself, and the rest is history. Bold.
So of course, I acted it cool, and then she walked away, and I was shaking, like I couldn't believe she came up and talked to me. I knew who she was. It was interesting because whenever I was a freshman, especially when we had like indoor like lunch sections, especially when the weather was cold or it was rainy outside, we killed time by going into the gym and just watching it. At the moment, you all had practice during lunch.
Yes.
For the high school lunch, at least. And so half of our entertainment was sometimes just watching the 8th grade teams like practice. And I always remember watching her play, and she was a good baller, you know, and out of a lot of 8th grade girls, you know, the good ones kind of stand out.
Right.
And I remember watching her and just thinking, like, man, she's a killer athlete, and just thought she was cute as could be. And I was like, man, I would love to date that girl. Never in a million years thought I would. So when she walked up to me and just said hello out of the blue, it was just, you know.
And you knew who I was because of my siblings.
Yeah.
And so
siblings were very popular in school. And so,
not me.
You know, everybody knew who kind of the Roberts people were, and her brother and sister. But anyways, so it was definitely surprising that she came up to me, and then I guess it was about a month or two later we started dating. So and it's been history. So that was actually 98.
98.
So it's
Wow.
been a while.
The Lord answers prayer.
Yes. Yes.
So for those that don't know who Jordan and Brianne Smith, could you just kind of shed light on to our listeners who Jordan and Brianne Smith are?
Oh my goodness. Go ahead. You start.
Man, it's been all over the page. I think as we are right now, I'm on the brink of turning 40.
You don't look it at all.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll take that. It's the facial aesthetics thing. But so we have a 6-month-old now, so recent father, practice owner here at Breathe Modern Dentistry. We started this dental office 5 years ago and just moved to this location. So kind of entrepreneur, if you want to call it that, but just, you know, loved my profession, was interested in dentistry from a young age because of a mentor in my church. And so after some years out of college and you know, living in the real world and working, I was like, this isn't doing it for me. So I went ahead and chased after the dream of going to dental school, and that was in 2010. Came out in 2014 and have been practicing ever since. But like I said, just started this practice a few years ago. Just trying to be a good husband, trying to be a good father, and trying to be a good, you know, practice owner and employer. And it's a lot of juggling, but thankfully to her, it's a lot easier than I would probably say it would be otherwise.
Well, I think that we're partners in everything. I mean, we're best friends, and I think that's why we've worked for so long. He's the first person I want to talk about everything, both good and bad, and I felt like we were partners in college. We would study together. He is the best tutor. I would have the biggest trouble in certain classes, and I'm like, why didn't they just describe it like that? He's like, I don't know, but he could always break it down for me. And then we worked for a while, which is actually how I got into dermatology. The physician that I work for now, I was one of her surgical and medical assistants beforehand, like Miss Rosa, while I had already finished undergrad. And so we were partners getting through the beginning of marriage and, having very little income.
Yeah.
And then we both got into him dental school and then me PA school at the same time, and we only applied to one school, which is not the smart thing to do.
It wasn't, but it turned out, and we both got accepted.
Yeah.
So it's been I mean, I don't know, since '98, it's been a long time, but it's been fun because we've done so much together. We did high school together, and then we did college together, and then we did part of our graduate school together. And so at every turn for us, it's been a chance to kind of grow together in the same lane, rather than coming together at such a further age as many people do now, and having to figure out how to acclimate to one another. It's been I don't want to say easy, but it's been a blessing. It's been fun, to just grow together in so many different ways. So she's definitely challenged me to be who I am now. I don't think without her I would have strove to be much. I mean, I never. It's not that I lacked inspiration, but I didn't have a lot of people in my life that I really looked up to in a way that like pushed me or inspired me to go above and beyond. I was one of the first, actually, I think the first from my father's side to even have a doctorate of any type. My brother has a master's, and we were really the first, like, highest educated in our family. And recently we've had 2 other doctors come from our family, but it's been neat to just see how we've evolved in those ways together. And I think again, without her, I wouldn't have pushed that far.
Gotcha.
So I feel blessed to have had her, and I think a lot of the God's voice has been in her, coming through her, to me, to inspire me, to push me on. But anyways, physician's assistant in dermatology, and just trying to figure out how to be good parents right now. I hope that's a good description.
No, that is fantastic. So that's a lot to unpack. Being a dad, starting a business, being friends from high school. So we're going to probably take it in whatever order it comes. So first off, so when it comes to especially couples that are married, I like to ask, how is being business partners as well as being in a covenant or in a marriage, how does that affect your family? How does that affect your faith? Because at sometimes, like, things may not be going well, and so you guys being partners together in business as well as being in a marriage, how does that affect the family dynamic?
I think it affects everything in mostly a positive way, because again, it's about growth, and you can take the downturns financially as only negative, which it is in the moment, but we have grown from that stronger. I think that's naturally what happens in the bad times, but we try to separate the two, and we're able to break down where he's like, okay, this is what's going on in the practice, this is how it's going to affect us at home, let's talk through how we can work through that together. So a lot of prayer.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you have to walk in faith anytime you take this big of a step. And it's been a lot of little steps and then big jumps. And those jumps are incredibly scary, and he's much better at that than I am. So we are definitely opposite, to where I like my safety, I like my consistency. Security is very important to me. And not that it's not to him. I mean, everybody wants security, but he's able to just go for that leap where I'm constantly like, are you sure? Are you sure? But so he stretches me in a very positive way to get outside of my box.
Okay.
She's often kept me reasonable. I think it goes hand in hand, and it's not that she's not open to taking risks, or I wouldn't have even been in this scenario. But I think everybody that leaps needs to have a rock to leap from. You know what I mean? And in my life, throughout my life, she's been the rock that I've leapt from. So in other words, she's been the support and the anchorage I needed to feel confident, to go out and strive to do things. Many times she's my soundboard. And half the time I don't like what she responds with, you know what I mean? Because I'm looking for affirmation. I'm looking for it's okay to go be crazy. And she helps me see the blind sides to a lot of the things that I've considered doing or have done, so that I either was better aware of what I was getting myself into because she kept me grounded, or it just fueled me to go out and do what I needed to do and have the faith that I needed to do by her just believing in me half the time. And so I think that God puts people together for a reason, and in my life, she's been what I needed to stay grounded and to stay level. I think at times I have to raise her up, I have to pull her out of her comfort zone, and I think other times she has to keep me from going too far. You know what I mean? And I think that's what she's been an amazing balance for me in my life. And I think she would say, the same. But it's been a blessing. I mean, I've told her a million times. I don't know where I'd be or what I would have been doing. But I'm pretty sure without her, I would have been, possibly a lost cause because my head was in the clouds in such a way that no one else was keeping me grounded when I was younger. And so from a young age, it's been like responsible grounding. You know what I mean? She doesn't diminish my hopes or my dreams. She just does it in a well reasonable way to keep me from just leaping blindly into so many different things. And so she's been a great anchor in my faith as well as in that need for someone to keep you level-headed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think business and finances was, in my family growing up, it was such a negative thing that I just went into marriage thinking no matter where we're at, if we are down here, up here, I want that to be something we work through in a positive way and it not be a battle and it not be something of strife. And not that we haven't had our moments, every marriage does, especially when it comes to finances, but that will never break us. That was like my goal going into this marriage amongst many other. So.
Okay. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to, in a marriage, there's sacrifice that needs to be made. Give us an instance where one of you had to sacrifice something.
She laughed.
So I was just trying to think. There's probably so many little things.
Or I know opening up a practice, that was brand new.
Well, I think just even before then, I was still working, and I think, when I finished PA school, I was working here in Tulsa, and I was going back and forth because he was finishing. I think he was still finishing like a year and a half.
Yeah, a year and a half left.
And so that was difficult, but I wanted my dream job, and so that was a sacrifice. When he opened his practice, it was leaving, again, a job very secure financially. I mean, better than I think he thought that he would be at that point in his career. And so it was very scary.
And so she was again the support and the consistency that we needed, so I could go and be inconsistent. So when you go from secure income to and I told others this before, when I started my practice, I didn't take anything home for 10 months. And that was a shock to the system of our family when you go from having a really great income to nothing for 10 months. It only messes with your confidence, messes with your head, especially as a male, with kind of a traditional pattern in your head from growing up that I'm the provider of the family. As much as that dynamic changes nowadays, it's still something that kind of the core of my heart was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so, the sacrifice of that really fell on her shoulders in terms of her, her consistency and her work and everything else to allow me to go and to do this. And over the years, it's gone up and gone down. We just recently started this practice, or moved over here, I should say. And it's kind of been like taking a step back. It's almost been like opening the practice again, something that we talked about, to begin with. But she knew that it was kind of like we're going to take another step backwards in order to hopefully take a couple of more in the future to be able to serve more people in a bigger location. But it's constantly just been a game of, where are we? Who's going to sacrifice for what? And we just have to communicate a lot. And I think most people in a marriage, one of the biggest things that I see in terms of downfalls is just communication and understanding who's sacrificing and when and why, and almost being consensual to that. You know what I mean? Because sometimes I think people are willing to, but when they're not asked, it gets really difficult. And so I think we've done a good job of communicating that and being open with each other. And there's things that I've been wanting to do or had wanted to do in the past that I didn't do because it wasn't going to be good for our family at the time. You know what I mean? So you have to take the right risks at the right time, at least in my opinion. So sacrifices in our family, they've gone all the way back to high school. I mean, one year she went to a different school for her senior year. And then there were other times where, again, she traveled and lived separately for 3 days a week. It's been kind of one thing after another.
Wow.
And I think that's the only thing that's been consistent in our marriage, is that we've had to find ways of sacrificing. It's like year after year after year after year. But our communication and our humility and our willingness to try to make sure each other's put first, I think is what's kept us through that, and it's never really been that hard.
So you guys mentioned something about, like, when you started the practice, you didn't take anything home for 10 months. And so kind of explain to me the mental processes of that, because here it is, like, you're going against the grain culturally when you're talking about, like, as a male, as a father, as a husband, you're not taking home anything for 10 months. Like, did you ever feel like, did I just make this mistake? Did I just actually destroy my family? Like, walk me through the process of what you were thinking.
Yeah. For 10 months. Well, in a nutshell of like the practice I was at prior to, it was out of town. So I was driving actually an hour and 15 minutes each way.
Just to get to work.
Just to get to work.
Wow.
And so, and maybe in New York, California, that's normal.
Yeah.
But
Right.
It's not very normal. So for me, it was a sacrifice in that, but I chose to try and go and provide a good income for us to kind of get us on our feet, because we just got out of grad school, right? So it was 6 months after grad school that I was able to take that offer. And so it was good for a little while, but I didn't enjoy it. However, on the flip side, the income was substantial, and what I realized in that short period of time, of the year and a half that I worked in this office, was because it was such a great income, it became my safety net, right? So we were able to put back and save and save and save, and instead of God's my source, it became the savings and checking account as my source. And I don't think that was something that I understood I did. It wasn't something I objectively chose to do.
Yeah.
But whenever it was being stashed away month after month after month, my confidence grew that, hey, we can solve it. We got the money. It's okay.
Yeah.
And so when you don't take home an income for 10 months and you see that savings shrink month after month after month after month, even with her income, because so much of what I did, I was pouring into my new practice. And so within 6 to 9 months, my confidence had been completely destroyed. My ego was gone, and God shook me into a good position where He reminded me that He is my source, and not the resources. Because that's where I put all my faith, was in the resources that God provided, not the source. And so hard. I think it was harder on me than it honestly was on her, because it shook my confidence as a man of what I thought I was. Right? I think for my future, it was the best thing that could have ever been taught to me. I think God did me a win by saying, "Hey, son, this isn't where your faith should reside." So I'm very thankful for it now, but it was a hard blow, and so every moment was just me trying to understand, like, what money was to me, what it had become, what it was to us, and so it was good for us to evaluate, because at one point our confidence, having the income that we had and having it all stored away or saved, I think it was easy for me to feel a little bit more puffed up. For her, coming from a family where at times it was harder financially, when she was growing up, it almost seemed like no matter what we did save, her confidence never really changed. And so I realized that's something we often struggle with internally, and it doesn't necessarily attach itself to a bank account, right? Your security and your faith in things, if it's going up and it's going down based on the numbers you see, there's probably a problem with that, right? And that's still a challenge I face today.
And that's my mentality that I've had to work and grow through, and I think I'm much better than I used to be, was because of things that happened as a kid. I'm always waiting for the next shoe to drop. It doesn't matter what we had and what was going good. I'm like, okay, but I'm preparing myself for the bad thing to happen, and you don't want to live that way. And like you said before, he's always flying high and like, we're great, and this thing is going to work out great, the practice. And I'm like, yeah, but what if it doesn't? And so I have had to work on my faith in the opposite direction. So
interesting. So we are sitting, this is a beautiful facility, by the way, and we'll probably show you like what it looks like and everything, but we are sitting in a beautiful facility. And so kind of walk us through the process of how this became to be Breathe Modern Dentistry.
All right, I'm going to try to make that story brief, but I'll get you the juicy details because I want to be raw about it. I started my practice on an area here in Main Street, Broken Arrow, and so it's an old downtown Main Street that's been revitalized, et cetera. And so it had been growing. It was like one of the top 10 main streets in America, et cetera. But convenience was getting hard. We were kind of packed into a second story. You guys had been there, so you had seen it. And So 3 years into my practice, I was trying to decide, like, what are we going to do in 2 years when the lease is up? And I happened to be driving by this location one day, and it had been an empty restaurant for, I don't know, like 5 years.
Wow.
And I was actually headed to Charleston to grab some dinner for it. I pulled over here on the side of the road, and as I was going to Charleston's, I just happened to look back over at the building, and I just felt the Spirit say, "That's your next home." And it kind of threw me in a minute. Like it was almost like disturbing when I felt that. And I just questioned it the whole time. I went to Charleston's, picked up the food, and I pulled back into the parking lot here, and I prayed, and I stopped, and I remember exactly where I stopped my truck, and I just said, "I don't want to make this up, but I'm pretty certain I felt you say this is our next home."
Yeah.
And I just felt the confirmation, like, yes. And I was like, when? And of course,
Right.
time is not one of those things that I feel like the Spirit ever gives.
Yeah.
So I said, well, that would be incredible. At the time I thought, who knows when? 10 years from now. Like it seemed completely out of possibilities because one, it's a large building. Two, it's on 2 acres of land. It's next to Bass Pro. It's kind of prime real estate. And I thought, there's, who knows? Maybe in a decade, it's going to be cool to see what God can do.
And then you came home and told me.
And I came home and told my wife. And here's what I said, in verbatim. I kid you not.
Yep.
So I walked in and I was like, hey, you're not going to believe what I felt like the Spirit impressed on me when I was driving by that old Lone Star building. He said that was going to be like our next home. And I said, wouldn't that be, and I'm being conservative for her sake. I'm like, Can you imagine like in 5 years? And of course my wife's like, babe, in 10 years, that would be amazing.
Great.
Right? So she doubled my
honey.
timeline. And I'm like, man, I was being conservative. I thought maybe in 5 years. And she's like, yeah, in 10, pretty cool. And so it kind of left at that. Now I'll tell you, like in the summer of it, I actually had my creative director come and take a photo of it, and I had him Photoshop it, and I actually blew it up into a big poster frame. I still have it in my office. And I put it up in our consultation room, and I told my team, like, guys, this is where we're headed. I believe this is in my heart. This is where we're going. I don't know when, but this is what we're going to shoot for. And so that was in April. In August of that same year, I was on a mountain trip with my church. It's like a church group that goes, and it's called Mountain Men at our local church. And so we went to Colorado, and then it had been the second year that I had gone. And I sat down and was listening to a sermon from Transformation Church. Pastor Todd was talking about crazy faith. And long story short, as I was listening to that, towards the end of that sermon, I just felt the impression I didn't have the faith that he was speaking about in that sermon. And I'm in the mountains. I'm in this valley. It's beautiful. I'm alone. I've been reading all day and praying, and I've been watching this video I downloaded on YouTube before I got there. And as I'm praying, I've just felt, God, I don't have this kind of faith. And he said, look at where I brought you from. Turn around and see where you started and where you are now. Yeah. And then I just felt him say, turn back around, keep walking, because we have more to go. And it was in that moment I felt him say, start, like go forward. And so I just was like, wait a minute, like now? Because it's funny because coincidentally in that video about crazy faith, it was about them moving from the church into the Spirit Bank Center in Tulsa, which is a huge location, right? Yeah. And so it was his first video about that 5-year journey that he wrote it down and he prayed about it, and now it was happening. And so it was just such a eerie similarity to the fact that I wrote it down, put up a picture, been praying about it, and I just felt God say, like, now's the time. And it did not feel like it was the time. It really didn't. But I came back, and I have a business partner, and I met with him, and he's the one I went on the year one trip with. And I just said, hey, he's like, how'd the trip go? It's the first time we got together. He's like, how did the trip go, man? What was your year like? And I said, man, it was magnificent. I go, you're not going to believe what I felt the Spirit tell me this time. And he was like, what? And he said, I said, call in the building. Let's see what they're asking for it. He said, you ready? And I go, no. Call the building. When you do what you got, you're told to do. Yeah. And so he did, and kind of the rest was history. Now, I'll say that between the time that he called and COVID hit and all these kind of things, there were so many different roadblocks, and it felt like the enemy was constantly trying to hold us up from the change. But we got the building and the location for a price that is just still absurd to me because it had been sitting there for so long. It was like God just teed it up for us. Between COVID and whatnot, we had better rates after COVID happened. And we had to pause because we got shut down for 6 weeks, right? We lost the banks that were working with us to get us the deal. We lost their support because basically we were shut down. They said, come back and talk to us after a couple of months again of having revenue. And in between times, because of the way everything had gone, we got better rates. Everything continued to work out where it became even a better, sweeter deal. So God in His timing always does come through. But it's been challenging. And I'll say one other thing, because I think when it comes to people following that or getting out of the boat and walking on water, whatever you want to call it, right? Getting out of your comfort zone. There's so many times that you feel like God's holding you up. And in this case, I felt like God was pulling me.
Yeah.
And there were times that I would get so frustrated. And I do remember a moment where I was on my way to the gym in the morning, and this is probably 8-9 months before we even settled on, and finished signing the papers on the deal. And I remember thinking, I was at the gym, and on the way there, though, I had been talking to God, just saying, God, I don't feel ready. Why are you having me do this right now? Right? Why can't we have like $1 million in the bank? Just so we have safety to go along with this, whatever it may be. And I just remember kind of complaining, right? It was kind of like a David moment. I was just kind of griping. And I got to the gym, and I ended up popping on a Stephen Furtick sermon, and I was just listening to something. In the middle of the sermon, it kind of had nothing to do with what he was actually talking about. He said, y'all know why Abraham had a child at 90 and not like 30 or 40, right? I know. Do y'all know? And he's talking to the audience. And he said, because if Abraham had it at 30, he'd have thought he did it. Yeah. When he had it at 90, it was because God did it. And I was doing tricep extension. I stopped and I just froze and I let go of it. And I just said, okay, I get it. This is about you. It's not about me. Right? So he required me to do it when I was not ready or prepared. And he required me to step out whenever it was not going to be obvious that it was because of what I did already. Right? And so it's this whole building, this whole thing for my wife and I both has been a huge faith walk. Because we didn't feel ready, but we felt called to it. Which is the same pattern over and over and over, right? We see it in the Bible, we see it in our own personal lives, that we're often called to do things before we feel prepared or feel ready. And this was another one, right? And it still feels like we're doing that on a daily basis. But we're getting more comfortable with that.
Wow.
And if that's where our comfort is, great. Because I'm happier being comfortable in leaping than sitting still.
So Brianne, he comes back from this trip. He tells you, where's your faith at the time?
Well, that I guarantee you it's going to happen because this guy makes things happen. When we're there. So I'm like, oh no, like, what are we getting ourselves into? So it's my faith and my prayer to God to continue to work on me. Because again, I'm like, okay, well, I guess I need to talk to, I don't like to say her name without her permission, but to talk to my supervising physician about, can I work more? Am I, do I need to?
Okay, I need more safety.
Right.
She's like, I'll go work harder.
Yes, but no, it's just about me having faith about what God was telling him. And that his promise is that no matter what, he comes back and is like, Brianne, but I've got you through this. And you thought that you didn't have the strength or the ability, or whether it was at the time me doubting my intelligence to get you through PA school. Hey, I did that. I got you the job that you always wanted, that area that a lot of people want to get into and can't. Got you that. Got him the job where he was going out of town and driving back and forth. And guess what? All that savings is what allowed him to make the practice what it is. I did that. Where is your faith? That's his constant talk to me. So again, I'm a growth in progress, but it was
like
every time he says something like, I'm going to do this, we're going to end up here. I'm like, oh Lord, here we go. Because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But I just have to work on, being like, all right, babe, what do I need to do to help in the meantime? So, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it often happens though, because I try not to leap out on my own will. And I think I've done that a few times and it doesn't always work out well. So I try to be very cautious these days about leaping in a direction that I didn't actually get direction in, and I think we do that often. Even recently I've been kind of fighting my own mind on what do we do next? How do we take this practice? Where do we go with it? And oftentimes I'm realizing I'm doing all that without stopping and asking God and going,
is this your will?
You want to guide me again? Because I'm sitting here trying to make plans.
Exactly.
And I'm not sure you're in any of them. And so I'm even doing that now. But so many times I've had to stop, and I think just like she just said, I have to look back at my history. I have to look back at what God's already done in my life. It's kind of like, your Hebrews Hall of Fame or Hall of Faith, as they call it, and looking back and going, what has God already done? Not in the biblical stories. What's he done in my life? You know what I mean? And what's he done in our lives? Because half the time, if we just recount the joys and the victories that he's provided, we'll find the faith we need. It's just so easy to overlook it. It's so easy to overlook it. So I'm thankful that she has always believed the things that the Spirit has told me. And it's gone to both ways. But it's been interesting the last few years. Some really direct things that came from the Spirit, and it's always when I got quiet, got alone. And half the time it's been in the mountains. Maybe God just lives more in Colorado than anywhere else. But man, you get quiet and you just get into somewhere majesty. But majestic, as I would say, in the mountains
Yeah.
and valleys, and you
Yeah.
just give God thanks for everything He does, and just listen, and He'll often speak, and He has in many ways, to the point where I'm almost scared of getting quiet.
Yeah.
Because every time He's said something, it's really pushed me out of my comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's led to the best things. You
Wow.
know? So,
Man, if I were to sum up what you guys just said, it doesn't always make sense, but it always makes a miracle in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. And before you go, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and be able to share this message with everyone that you know so that we can continue to do what God has placed on our hearts to be able to take this message of faith around the world. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys here next time.